Floris van Straaten of the Dutch daily NRC Handelsblad. Although you just suggested that Europe is fairly united in its approach to this G20, on one particular issue, on the fiscal stimulus, there seem to be strong disagreements, at least between the Germans, the French, on the one hand, especially the Germans, and on the other hand, the Americans, and to some extent the British, although we are not quite sure anymore where the British stand after Mervyn King's comments yesterday, and whereas Gordon Brown himself seems to be still sort of urging people to have a big international fiscal stimulus. Where exactly does Britain stand in this?
I don't understand the argument there's this great division. The German fiscal stimulus in 2 budgets is greater than the British fiscal stimulus already. So the idea that there's a German position which is against fiscal policy and there's a British position which is for fiscal policy doesn't seem to me to be borne out by the actions, the facts of what different governments have done. And obviously there's a budgetary round. Our budget comes in April. But the impact of some of the budgetary decisions that were taken last year haven't yet been felt. But the core case that does fiscal policy have a role when markets' confidence collapses and demand collapses, the answer must be yes. So I don't see a division about that, and I don't think I'm being blind about this. I just think that there's a fear in Europe that America only talks about demand and doesn't talk about financial regulation. There's a fear in America, maybe, or in the American media, that Europe only talks about financial regulation and hedge funds and doesn't talk about fiscal policy. In fact, if you look at the actions of all the governments, they're doing both.
But the fact is that the Americans want the Europeans to do more, and there is not much political leeway, it seems, at this stage for the Europeans to do much more.
Well, there's been a $440 billion European stimulus. I think that's the total additional stimulus so far by governments around.
But that's all already happened, but yeah, the Americans want to have more.
Yeah, but one issue is that in Europe, we have an automatic fiscal stimulus. As unemployment goes up, the budgetary support for the unemployed goes up more in some countries than in others. And I think that's part of the package. So I honestly think that there's a bit of a false dichotomy being painted here. We all know that if only one country, even if it's the US, does a fiscal stimulus, that's not going to be enough. But equally, we've got all countries doing it. I mean, I spoke to the South Koreans. They've got a fiscal stimulus. So the question of what happens next, obviously in different countries, it depends on the different budgetary situation. But given that we're all open trading countries, we depend on each other.
In 1944, during the Bretton Woods conference, there was one very strong dominant power which was sort of more or less setting the terms for the new financial system. Some historians and economists say that that is missing at this moment, and therefore this meeting in London may have the same fate that the one in 1933 had, when the United States was also not so dominant as it was in 1944.
Well, that's a very good warning. The 1933 conference is a very good warning. Franklin Roosevelt didn't come, and he sent a very junior official, I think, to participate in the 1933 conference. But in 1933, we had a much less interdependent world. And so, you know, the Tennessee Valley Authority was created to kickstart the American economy. The New Deal was essentially a national New Deal, and that's why the Prime Minister is saying that we need a global New Deal. And I think that America recognizes this. It's a more multipolar world, so you need cooperation from the Chinas and the Indias and the surplus countries of the Gulf as well. And that is a reality. But I think that President Obama has made clear that he embraces a spirit of cooperation. He thinks that while America is the superpower, it needs allies. And I think he's coming to London determined to get results, not by imposing them, but by agreeing them.